London Business School is top ranked among the most prestigious graduate educational institutions. LBS scholar Professor Peterson and Brown recently introduced a book with the title of Disaster in the Boardroom. There have been many corporate scandals and collapses over the last few decades. Disaster in the Boardroom not only summarizes them in an interesting manner, but also places them into an historical context and demonstrates that very little has changed. Despite the apparent advance of technology and governance principles, there remains an almost unlimited capacity for boards to get things wrong. Book presents summary of case findings of world-renowned companies such as Facebook, Google, Uber, and etc. Board failure is not just a British or an American problem. This analysis covers board failure in major corporate scandals over the past 40 years involving companies from Japan, Sweden, Iran, Malaysia, China, Brazil, and so many other countries. This is also a problem that cuts across sector barriers from financial services to resource extraction, high technology to catering, Silicon Valley startups to firms with a century and more of history behind them. No sector or type of company is exempt. National and sector cultures are not responsible for scandals and failures, or at least not solely. Board and organizational culture, however, play a defining role, and no place has a monopoly on dysfunctional company culture. And scandals ranging from bribery, fraud, abuse of power, and environmental disaster. Understanding the cultural dynamics of boards is crucial to understanding why crises emerge and how to make boards more effective at preventing them. Board culture, like any culture, is based on the beliefs and values that board members hold in common and manifests itself in how board members behave towards each other, how they communicate with each other, and perhaps most importantly, how they make decisions. Subordinate board is one that is incapable of acting independently. This subordination sometimes happens when the organization has a dominant CEO. Facebook, as an example of a company where the board has consistently struggled to make any impact or reign in the senior executive team. Its corporate governance, in name only, as founders, CEO, and chairman of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg wields immense control over the company's governance despite its publicly owned status. Phenomenon of missing key voices on boards is widespread and links directly to a lack of diversity, not just of ethnicity, gender, and so on, but also background and lived experience. Sexual misconduct scandals at Google are a case in point. Starting in 2017, US Department of Labor as part of an ongoing investigation, asserted that tech giant Google was engaged in systematic compensation disparities against women. From its inception in 2009, Uber was an assertive, ambitious organization, keen on dominating newly evolving ride-sharing industry. But Uber pushed the boundaries to breaking point and then beyond. Companies' aggressive tendencies led Uber to break moral and ethical limits. That same cultural amplification permeated the culture of the board as well, with aggressive figures like Kalanick and his supporters dominating the boardroom and denying other stakeholders voice. Key aspect of bystander boards is where the board fails to work together and no one steps up to take responsibility at a critical time. This can be especially dangerous when the company is faced with a major disaster, such as British Petroleum and the explosion on one of its contracted oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. As a consequence, company was faced with a stream of civil and criminal lawsuits, including corporate manslaughter, and had to pay over $65 billion in fines. Boards can become prisoners of their own culture. Consequences have been repeated failures by the big four accounting firms known as PricewaterhouseCoopers, Deloitte, EY, and KPMG to spot financial weaknesses during audits which have jeopardized business across the globe, risking investor funds, pension plans, and even the existence of firms themselves, as was seen in the collapse of Arthur Andersen. Demise of Royal Bank of Scotland, known as RBS, is an example of groupthink that saw several board dysfunctions coming together as a result of the drive for consensus in the boardroom, such as lack of independence, amplification of culture, and missing key voices. All of this was evident at RBS and resulted in a lack of rigorous challenge, scrutiny, and questioning, especially by the independent directors. Result was a charismatic CEO was given free rein to wield his considerable power, culminating in the acquisition of ABN AMRO. Causes of dysfunctional boards includes lack of independence, ineffective board leadership, lack of diversity, structural board problems, conformity, and other behavioral problems. Solution to these problems lie very much in the hands of the boards of directors. Proposals for practical improvement include improving board leadership by selecting the chairs who are able to both listen and lead. Second one, improving the functioning of boards, including its committees. Selecting highly effective independent directors. And finally, strengthening board culture. In conclusion, it could be noted that board evaluation is paramount. Finally, addressing the collective responsibility of all boardroom stakeholders, especially the role of regulators and investors, is necessitated. These are some of the reviews for the previously presented book. Heidi K. Gardner, Distinguished Fellow of Harvard Law School, has stated this important book should appeal to a wide variety of readers, well beyond the boards themselves. John Allen, who is the chairman of TESCO and former president of the CBI, has to say, finally, there is a book on the market that is practical, thought provoking, and useful read for existing and aspiring board directors and executives. With that, we will be concluding the presentation. Reference for today's presentation is from LBS podcast and a book published by one of the LBS scholars, Professor Peter Anderson and Brown. Thanks for watching.